how inefficient some of this is and how good it would be if either some of them disappeared or some of them merged, etc. But there isn't a mechanism that is easily found to make that happen. And so I think that's ultimately why in a whole series of endeavors, private firms where there are actually equity owners have a certain edge on the provision of goods and services over the not-for-profit sector. But, yeah.
Thank you, T.C., and thank you, Michael. My name is Neil Ghosh with SNV, Netherlands Development Organization. I wanted to make a quick comment and a question regarding your last slide. The comment I wanted to share with you that from SNV's side, we believe there is a learning process in development. And one of the things you mentioned, Jeff Sachs and Mohammad Yunus, we actually formed a board last year to engage people from all across the life to learn how can we improve and better our whole process. The question I wanted to ask in terms of the comment you made, how to weed out failures by competition. So if I look at the slide where you showed President of Switzerland as the last on the right-hand corner, how do you see that we weed out the competition, we weed out the failures, and go to a stage in the development process where we used to be and where you see the development in 5 years' time?
I'm not quite sure I understood the question maybe.
The whole development process is evolving in terms of getting more competition, getting more clarity, engaging the private sector. In your vision, do you have a sense where we are today and where we should head at moving in the future?
I have a sense of something. I'm not sure whether it's a good sense. I would have thought that the history of development in the last decades, or in the last century, it was a century of entry and no exit. There are always new development organizations, and we know of hardly anyone who ever went out of business. And so now we're in a period when we see a more rapid development, economically speaking, in the world than we've ever seen in history, with China, India, the most prominent examples of countries rising, and the creation of the entry of these rising countries into the development business as well. Some of it has tinges of export credit or similarly motivated forays into development, as was originally the case in today's rich countries. And then every country, like the Czech Republic or whoever, they set up their own aid organizations, etc., and more of this coming. Then you have philanthropy growing and entering. So you have a bigger and bigger set of players, larger and larger set of players, and at the same time a shrinking focus in terms of absolute poverty, because there is a major progress being made in reducing extreme poverty. So what will that lead to? I would have thought this is now, obviously you will realize this, not in the spirit of what is being discussed in international aid venues. I think this whole aid coordination debate is no press, right? It's largely fluff, and what really, because individual actors, be they state actors or private actors, will talk, and there are a lot of meetings and so on, but ultimately do what they want. And if there is when you have and it's getting harder in the world to come to agreement between governments because you have more heterogeneous, important players, and to get the Russians and the Chinese and the US and whoever else to agree on things that they actually disagree on, it's kind of hard to see how that works. So how does a place like this work out? I think overall, this multitude of players is a symptom of success. Everybody is getting richer and therefore does these things to some degree. And hopefully, out of lots of little and big initiatives will come further good ideas. But where is the mechanism that disciplines the long tail of bad ideas here? And that's not obvious where that is. And because in aid, same argument as I made it before about NGOs. There is no market for corporate control. The best chance we have is to emphasize more investment into impact evaluation so that those who give money have a better sense of which organizations are actually performing well and not which ones spend most time in aid coordination discussions.
Very good. Yes, back there, please.
Hi, thank you for this very interesting discussion. My name is Nora Brown from the Global Business School Network, and a lot of our business school partners, primarily in Africa, are doing a lot of work with small growing firms. And essentially what we hear is that they're creating a well-equipped pool of business talent that's essentially hitting their heads against the wall because they're too big for microfinance, too small for corporate finance. They're now educated, they have the tools to grow, but they don't have the access to finance. And I'm just curious if you could comment on finance in the middle.
Yeah, arguably, and this is not a new point, finding ways of supporting the missing middle is one of the major challenges in development finance. And as a directional point, the critical thing here is to, number one, allow firms to emerge that have potential to raise productivity, and then have systems that pick amongst them and make bets on them, the financial system, and so that those who have potential can actually show that they can grow, and then to weed out the ones that don't grow. And so this is a combination of business environment issues, facilitating entry, strengthening creditor rights, credit information systems, etc., and at the same time, development of capabilities in the banking systems to respond to this. And here, my reading of the evidence, and there's not that many studies on it, there's one that the World Bank did on Latin America, on the various countries in Latin America, and one that the research department of the World Bank did on 45 countries across the developing world. It suggests that when business environments improve, banks are actually willing to come in and do support the SMEs of this world. And because banks see that there is unexploited potential, and to some degree, institutions like the IFC or FMO or DEG or whoever it may be have a chance of pushing that process further a little bit and speed it up a little bit. But I would, once again, the reading of that literature leads me to emphasize again the basic rules that allow new firms to come into being.
One question over there.
Paul Miller, Catholic Relief Services. Thank you for your thought-provoking presentation. Your comment on civil society organizations and their role in rulemaking, some of our friends in civil society suggest that they've been systematically excluded from international and national fora in which rules are made. Do you share that? And if so, is there a way to remedy that? Is it simply the lack of shareholders that these organizations are accountable to, or what's the explanation?
I would have thought that, first of all, there are lots of non-governmental organizations that are represented, then there are others that aren't, and then there's probably an intersection. There's probably some of those that aren't that shouldn't, and some of those that are that shouldn't, and I don't have a view about what that is, but I would have thought that outrage channeled through organizations is one of the things that drives the political agenda, even if you're not formally represented at some tables. And to some degree, it can be helpful for an agenda if you're not represented and are not looking to influence the rapporteur and what they write in the next minutes, but focus on the main story. So I would have thought civil society has obviously a major role to play, does play it more or less well in different areas. And for the development of civil society, maybe we should have something like the Doing Business report to see how easy it is for such organizations to emerge and to operate without undue interference from governments.
Thank you. Other? Oh, please, Steve. Let's wait for microphone. Thank you.
Thank you also for a wonderful presentation. In an earlier session, speaking about development aid from donor agencies, there was a suggestion that the failure to really have innovation and then efficiency and effectiveness is a result of unwillingness because of public oversight to take risk, as a private sector might, and therefore perhaps the unwillingness to then report on failure, and therefore failure doesn't get uncovered. What would you recommend, in fact, though, that donor agencies, bilateral and others, do to increase the likelihood of generating real innovation and ideas and taking the risk and, as they said, willingness to invest in failure so that success would really win out in the end?
There's one part of that agenda which conceptually is easy and one that's conceptually difficult. To enable this to happen, you could just say, give more freedom to the players in the development aid industry to do their stuff. And that's obviously part of the issue, as you pointed out, in some areas. And then comes the difficult part, which goes back to the main point: how do you discipline failure? We all know that it can happen that somebody has a project that doesn't perform all that well, or an organization that doesn't perform all that well, and it just keeps going. And so so how does one where's the mechanism that makes these things, broadly speaking, stop? And so the search is on for two things. One is the equivalent, if possible, to a market for corporate control for such organizations. So either at the simplest level, but it also is hard to make work, sunset clauses. I was associated with the setting up of the so-called Investment Climate Facility for Africa. And in the beginning, so a partnership between the private sector and governments, etc. In the beginning, it was supposed to last for 7 years and then stop. But I think they have already decided that they could maybe go on. So what is that mechanism? And that's where I'm fuzzy and I don't know. And so that brings me back to better impact evaluation that at least makes the governmental decision makers that you refer to, or the private donors, better aware of who is doing well and who isn't. And then hopefully through that mechanism channel money into those areas where there is more success rather than less. And when it comes to what is an effective evaluation mechanism, I would argue that the big thing is having the right counterfactuals in evaluation. In the World Bank Group, for example, to name that example, after the Wappenhans report that some of you may remember some years back, the World Bank project success rate was brought up to 80%, 80 to 90% or so. In the IFC, the project success rates was broadly in the neighborhood of 60%. So if you believe these success rates as that are used to express development success in some areas, you would think, let's shut down the IFC, move the resources to the World Bank, and that'll overall make things perform better. The issue, of course, is that the methodologies behind this are a little different. In an organization like the IFC, and it's similar in sister organizations, a big part of what drives the success rates is whether a project outperforms the market. So if it's performing better than on the financial side than the cost of capital, for example. So there's a whole control group out there, the market, and you have to beat that market to be deemed to be a success. In those areas where you don't have a market, most evaluations, as you well know, are such that you ask yourself, what was the intended purpose of the project? And then were the intended purposes achieved? And so you can get nice success rates by being modest, or more generally, it's difficult in many cases to quantify. When we try to apply in the IFC a little bit more of control group mentality, unfortunately, I guess, for the people involved, we hit upon the first project, which was a technical assistance project in an unnamed country for unnamed farmers. And it was a good project on traditional evaluations. The project purpose was achieved, things improved for the farmers, the technical quality of the advice was good, etc. But then we did a control group evaluation and found that the farmers that didn't benefit from the great assistance of the IFC-sponsored project did even better. Because in that particular case, the market provided flows of information and training through sales agents of companies that purchased from them that performed even better and gave better incentives. And if you use control groups and in some cases it's possible to do randomized experimental designs, in some areas you have to be more modest, but if you use that, then your success rates come down. Your success, if you beat the market, if you beat everybody else, being better than everything else 50% at a time is great. You don't have to have 90% success. That sounds actually fishy. Or you remember Progresa, or now called Oportunidades, the conditional cash transfer program in Mexico. When that was evaluated for the first time in a rigorous way, the success rate was 70 to 30, excellent by any sensible standards. But in the press, this was written up as 30% failure and sounded awful. And when we proposed inside the organization where I was more rigorous evaluation, the political problem came very quickly. It brings down the ostensible success rates. So that is something where the development community as a whole has a real task, because it's conceptually clear where this should go. It's, as you all know, it's sometimes difficult to make it work, but the direction is clear. And getting the politics of communicating what is real success and what is not, and what should therefore stop and what should be continuously supported, getting that right, that is an endeavor that we can all embark on.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to cut it here because I know that it's time to move on. I want to thank Michael. He's gotten us thinking from how do we use our coffee consumption, drinking habits to spur development, to actually more fundamentally think about how to create a more competitive market for aid and deal with this very thorny issue, which we just treated here at the end, which is evaluation and making that much more rigorous so we understand better and have more transparency in this market. This has been an absolutely engaging and thought-provoking presentation. Please join me in thanking Michael very much. Okay, we're going to give you a short break. Please come back at 2:15 right here in this room for the plenary panel on new paradigms in 2010. Thank you.